Thanks, David. I'll do my best. Good to see everybody. I'm Presley Reeder, and welcome to the Phoenix Business Forum. Those of you who've been before, we're glad to see you again. If you've never been, or you used to go in the past, this is our new format. We bring some really interesting, handsome person on the stage, and I interview them about their experiences, their thoughts, their journey, and hopefully it's informative, and hopefully you also get to, like David said, you get to meet each other and build some relationships that carry on beyond just our event today. So great to have you here. I am privileged to be sitting with a friend of mine today, and also a really interesting guy, and we're going to have a great conversation. Dr. Peter Stockton, for those of you who don't know him, is an emergency physician. He was telling me beforehand he actually never graduated from undergrad, but he is a licensed emergency physician. So that tells you a little bit about Peter's non-traditional approach to life, which I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about. But we wanted to bring Peter in because he's also he's part owner and a minority shareholder in a publicly traded national hospital system. He's a medical director for 2 hospitals here in the Valley, and that hospital system is expanding in the Valley. And he's been in the ER throughout COVID. And so we thought it would be really interesting to hear from a physician's perspective what that journey was like. And we're going to try to stay out of politics as much as we can and just stay involved in what life was like for an emergency room physician and his patients, and making decisions also as a business owner during that whole time. So with that, I'm excited to jump into it with you, Pete. It's good to have you here.
Thanks for having me, you guys.
You and I were chatting about what we should cover and kind of talked about going through the phases of it. So, when the rest of us got the news at the beginning of COVID that there's this virus and there's going to be these things happening, you were considering it as an individual, but also as a physician. What was that initial stage like for you as a physician?
So there's a whole bunch of things that happened immediately when I think about COVID. I was responsible for our testing, our protocols, our treatments, outpatient, inpatient, patient flow within the hospitals, infection control. I mean, there's an incredible amount that goes with that. The things that I noticed right away was how are we going to actually get tests and see if people have COVID? That was a big problem initially. There was no testing out there. The first test that we got was 20% sensitive and specific, which means that 80% of the time it was wrong. And that continued to be a theme that went through all of the major testing kits and is still there today. So that was the first thing to kind of figure out. Secondarily, we had incredibly higher patient volumes that were associated with COVID, and so we need to rule out regular sick people versus COVID sick people. We need to develop, find the medications and stay on the kind of the bleeding edge of things as vaccines roll out, medications roll out, treatments roll out. We did some things really well. We did some things poorly. But part of the thing that I've learned from this whole thing is the team that you build and the ability to kind of flex and modulate and rely on team members is such an integral part of any kind of business thing. And I did not know that before. I have an absolutely amazing core team of people, about 6 people that were constantly in contact with vendors, getting testing, getting monoclonal antibodies, getting vaccinations. The problem was so complex, and then just to kind of frame things too, I have all of those things I'm dealing with, and then the information that's coming in on things is subject to so much disorder. That's
you
like a
mentioned
second
that
subject.
when we were prepping too. So you go through this initial phase where you're getting tests that are inaccurate. You're trying to adapt your team, build your team, and I guess the key word there is adapt. I mean, what did you start to do to scramble and gather the right information to make the really, life-saving decisions you need to make as an ER physician?
So each hospitals are developing protocols for treatment for COVID for mild, moderate, severe, and critical disease. Those were the 4 categories. And each one of those has their own protocol. And some of them have parameters that were unclear. Some of them were from the CDC. Some of them were from the World Health Organization. Some of them were from the Arizona Department of Health. And none of them really matched. And the information that they were using was sometimes not peer-reviewed or was tainted by large corporations funding the studies, so they can basically tell what the study wants to do. It was really, really sad for me to see the dissolution of evidence-based medicine as I had previously known it. High-quality, rigorous studies done in a double-blinded, placebo-controlled way that have confounders removed have gone away. The business of medicine has seen the opportunity to push their agenda, and it's kind of sad.
Yeah, I bet. Did that happen prior to COVID? Did you already see that pattern, or did COVID start it or accelerate it?
It rapidly accelerated it. There was some. Just to kind of tell you guys, there's some vaunted institutions that we are supposed to always rely on. The New England Journal of Medicine, the Lancet from Britain. Those are 2 kind of like some of our holier institutions. And there was rumblings that people were resigning because they'd been taking money from someone, or there was people who had been accused of allowing data to come through that wasn't verified because it favored some outcome for a company they worked for. And those were rumblings beforehand. And then to just see one of the things that is just absolutely amazing to me is, as a physician, I want to know how to treat you in the best way that I absolutely can. My vow is not to hurt anyone. My vow is to always put the patient ahead of my personal gain. And they don't even swear the Hippocratic Oath anymore in schools, not for about 12 years. And it offended someone, so they don't do it anymore. So for me, being a doctor, the most important thing is that when I walk into that room, the patient understands that I am using every single bit of my ability to not only get the accurate diagnosis, but to educate them and help them understand that I care about them and I want them to do better. And that's something that I focused on with our hospitals, and it has been amazing. It's a complete turnaround from what we call I'm calling the McDonalding of the hospital system here in Arizona specifically. There's a lot more emphasis on prepackaged care and how quickly your turnaround times are, and managing the physician as an employee and not as someone who can change somebody's life. And so that's a whole other aspect. Our hospitals are, you should look at our reviews. That's the easiest thing for me to say.
Yeah, who's reviewed their hospital? Has anybody? Raise your hand if you've ever reviewed your experience. Yeah? Okay, we've got a nurse here that's
they went to my hospital.
They went to your hospital. Yeah, he asks for reviews. Okay, so yeah, that's a great transition over to the business side of things. I know you. I know your heart that you just shared for just caring for people, changing their lives as a physician. You've literally stitched my son's face in your bedroom after he fell on your porch. Not that his porch isn't safe. It's my son that's not safe. But he cares deeply about his job as a physician. But you're also in business. And so you just began to touch on the business of medicine. And maybe you can talk about your system a little bit. And even through that COVID, that next phase, there were probably opportunities to capitalize on that. How did your hospital tackle that, or how did you interact with that?
So one of the things that is an emphasis at our hospitals is that we have the best testing, the quickest testing, the most valid testing. We know the pitfalls of our testing, and we offer that service to people to come in pre-flight, if you're concerned about things, if you think you've had an exposure, we focused really on making sure that we had rapid testing that had incredibly high sensitivity and specificity, and we continued to upgrade as the test came out. Any antigen test, just to give you some interesting points, any antigen test has a 30% false negative rate in the first 5 days of illness with COVID. That's all antigen tests. Then you have a PCR test, which is a polymerase chain reaction, is based off the actual DNA and RNA, and that one only has about a 12% to a 9% false negative rate. So, and that's in the first 5 days. So if someone comes in and they've got 2 days of symptoms and you give them an antigen test, 1 out of 3 people will still have COVID but be false negative. That's an incredible amount of error, which is in the system. And secondarily, I always compare it to, I hate to say this, but like Fry's was selling a spit test that was $20, and it had a 20% accuracy, which means that 80% of the time it was wrong, which is just incredible to me that they could do it. It says on it, not for diagnosis and those kind of things, so that's legally it's okay. But
If it's not for diagnosis, what exactly is it for?
I don't know, fun? I don't know. But the continual focus of our hospital was to do the most excellent thing, to do something different than everyone else is doing, and that has carried us with an incredible amount of momentum through the last few years. We had monoclonal antibodies before anyone ever did. We had protocols for administering them about 3 months in advance of all of the hospitals here, because we saw in the literature, which I was combing through literature. I've educated myself on how to read studies. I had multiple different things in residency where we would do go through scientific journals, and that became a skill that I relied on heavily to winnow out the actual conclusions of the paper, which are inaccurate or maybe swayed from the corporations that did it. And so I had a very different understanding than most physicians of COVID, and everyone that I talked to about it, it's amazing. I have all this trail of converted physicians. So if I can get somebody in a room, I have great data to show them, and there's some basic misunderstandings about COVID that we've been able to kind of expose and continue to do better treatment for people, and our success rates with our treatments are incredible.
So what do you attribute that to? Like your hospital being ahead of the game and you individually digging in and discovering some things that others didn't, just for recommendations for the rest of us in our learning?
I think a couple things really triggered a different response to me than the things that I had been doing. So first was finding out that our tests were horribly inaccurate. That's not acceptable. Like, this is a public health crisis. We need to figure out. COVID is terrible. I mean, it killed, I'm sure you guys know, it killed so many people and was so devastating, and we had so much misinformation. I mean, the fact that people thought ibuprofen was not good in this disease is just that one thing alone is incredible to me. So I started finding out all these things that I couldn't take at face value, and I began to really do a ton of research. And I mean, we're talking 5 to 6 journal articles a day, before I go to sleep, and just crunching the numbers myself, coming up with my own conclusions, and that helped us to stay ahead. The other thing was my team was doing the same thing. I had, on the pharmaceutical side, I had my pharmacist was incredible. His name's Chase Western. He was, he was getting monoclonal antibodies. He was finding out new treatments. It was just absolutely vital. My immediate superior, Dan Stites, was continually figuring out ways to get us funding for different tests or other ways to go to other states and to get tests to us. It was incredible. My nursing staff I was continually doing education points. Each morning we'd go to the whiteboard and they'd say, "What are you going to talk about today?" And I'd just go crazy on new statistics. We had alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, all the way up through Omicron, and each one of those iterations was different and was treated differently, affected you differently. It was incredible. It's this this medical time that has never happened before with the resources that we have to differentiate the most bizarre event that my generation's seen. I mean, that and the OJ trial, I think, so.
We'll talk about that next month, actually. We have a guest coming on that, no, we're not. Well, I mean, do you just attribute that, though, to having people around you who are of high character, a culture that did that? Because it sounds like others didn't, so there was a difference.
Yeah, I think that having a high suspicion for data coming in to be corrupt or to not be in the best interest of the patient helped us avoid some serious bad moves. In addition, I think we literally saved thousands of people's lives that wouldn't have been saved otherwise with the monoclonal antibodies and with some of the early adoption of steroids and things for treatment, which initially steroids were bad. They had a high mortality associated with the Italian data set, and then when you pull that data set out and you look at it, they only gave the steroids to people who were literally dying. So you're going to have a higher amount of mortality associated with giving steroids if that's your last-ditch effort. So it was just very interesting.
Did you have outside pressures, either financial pressures or pushes from pharmaceutical companies or others that were saying, no, you need to go this way? Apart from these erroneous articles you were sifting through or whatnot, did the hospital system feel those pressures? Or you as a physician?
I felt them. I know that my superiors felt them, and there was some interesting things that went on. I don't want to go down some roads. They're just politically, a morass. So I think that I'll say I was very surprised at the amount of political sway the pharmaceutical and insurance industries have in the United States. I was dismayed at the result of that.
And it interfered with your ability to serve as a physician. Do you feel like it
100%.
It actually was a hurdle that you had to get over in order to provide the best care?
Absolutely. I even have I have specific studies that I've looked at that are high quality studies that have opposite, slightly contrary to the public narrative things, and when I go to look for them on Google, I can't even find them anymore. It's amazing. They're buried on the 31st page, even though I look for it by the name, title, and author, which is incredible to me. It's interesting to me to see where we're going as a society as well. I'm first and foremost a believer in Christ, and that's something that is really important to me. That people see me as a man of integrity and a man who will always do the right thing for the people around him, and even at great personal cost. And so it's interesting. I've tried to live that. And so I've tried to do that in business too. I want the model that we have in our hospitals is that if you don't come there and feel like we're trying to change your life, then we've failed. And that's a kind of a grandiose statement, but I have people come to me who are literally dying. I have people who come to me who have a scratch, and I have to figure out the difference between those things. And who you have around you in those moments of stress when you're trying to save someone's life, or when you have someone screaming at you that they need the vaccine right now, and it's really interesting. I've learned a lot, and I've had lost some friendships with people over political things that were really bizarre. But sorry, I'll keep doing business stuff. I apologize.
No. At some point, we're going to have to hear one of your ER stories. I mean, they are just too good too good. I don't know if that's the right phrase, but there are some.
Everybody likes a good
I mean,
foreign body story.
let's talk about the ER a little bit, though. I mean, all of us have probably been in an ER, experienced what that's like. I would say it's fair that most people didn't want to be there and then had a less than optimal experience while they were there. You're trying to change that. Part of your system is a new vision for emergency care. Is that true?
So let me give you a great example. So you twist your knee in a basketball game. You didn't hit it on anything. You twisted it. It's swollen. You come into a normal emergency room. You're going to wait 3 or 4 hours to get back because you're not critical. Maybe even 6 hours, depending on if it's Friday night. So you get back to the back. The physician comes and sees you an hour after you get back, and hey, you twisted your knee. We're going to do an X-ray. The X-ray is negative. Here's a knee immobilizer, some crutches. Go home, follow up with your primary care or your orthopedic surgeon. Well, you don't have an orthopedic surgeon, so you go to your primary care. Primary care doctor says, hey, that looks bad. You should see an orthopedic surgeon. He refers you to an orthopedic surgeon. You go to the orthopedic surgeon. He says, hey, I need an MRI. I think you really hurt yourself. You go back to the primary care. He waits for MRI pre-auth. Once he gets the MRI pre-auth, you go get your MRI. After you get your MRI results read, then you go back to the PCP to get your MRI results. He says, yeah, you really hurt yourself. You need to go see the orthopedic surgeon. You go back to the orthopedic surgeon. He says, wow, you really hurt yourself. You need surgery. So you schedule your surgery. This is like 6 months after you injured yourself sometimes. I mean, like a best case scenario is 3 months, right? And with COVID, it's elongated even further. So you finally get scheduled for your surgery. You're out for 3 months. You're back in the game after that. So now you're somewhere between 6 to 9 months. You're returning to work. So you've lost all that time. You've been in pain. You come to my hospital. I see you within 5 minutes. I take you back. Say this is going to be an MRI. I call the orthopedic surgeon when I get the results an hour later, and I say, he needs to follow up tomorrow or the next day. We'll get him on the board for surgery. We save 6 months of your life in 6 hours.
Well, it sounds great, but I mean, why is it one way there and another way at your hospital?
I don't know.
I mean, is it not an insurance issue, or all the things that pop to mind are, well, yeah, your hospital, I must pay a lot more, or your hospital only takes a specific kind of insurance, or what gives?
So there's a lot to that. We do try and focus on commercial insurances and not on Medicare and Medicaid, but one of our facilities takes all insurances. So we're doing kind of an experiment with that right now to see if we can continue to do that incredibly high level of service with all comers. And so it's working pretty good.
I mean, is it a pay structure for the staff that's different, or a culture that you've created there to just tell the staff, hey, we're not going to let the first option happen. We're not going to let people walk out the door and go have that experience? Or, I mean, what are you doing different?
I'd say there's 3 things. We've got a design of our hospitals where it's physician-based and run instead of administrative. We have no administrators. All of our administrators are either nurses or doctors or pharmacists. So you have to wear several hats. That cuts out an incredible amount of baloney.
Bureaucracy, yeah.
And
bureaucracy.
Like, things that don't make sense, we don't do. We're very lean. Secondarily, it's built this way to make sure that if something comes up, the people who are looking at you as a physician or a nurse or any kind of provider, that they're coming at it from a standpoint of they've been in your shoes. So it's a little bit different from that standpoint. And then third, it's a model that we've just gone public, New Tech's facilities, and so we have 36 different facilities. We're now multi-state, I think 9 states, soon to be 12, and it's growing rapidly, and it works. We've dissected out the emergency room and the low acuity hospital stays and made them an excellence and a level of service that the big hospitals can't provide. And it's a great model, and it's so much better for the patients. It's amazing.
You keep making these statements like, I mean, it's great to hear about. You made a statement, we don't do the things you don't need us to do. Why are other people doing things to me that I don't need them to do? And yeah.
Money. Money.
Yeah. Okay, so
the leaner you are, the less you need to try and charge more and need to bill more, and you don't have we have one person doing our registration that's in control of that whole situation. It's like you have like 16 people at a hospital. We don't have any hospital administrators who are trying to keep up with government guidelines. We have one central person that does that for the entire set of facilities. It's just there's so much. We even pay our physicians more than other places. We pay our nurses more than other places. We want higher quality individuals, people who won't let a patient sit there in pain, who won't let someone be out in the lobby that we can bring back. I mean, it's you can do better, and people choose not to. It's the kind of the model of low level of service but high volume. That's a model. Where ours is lower volume, high level of service.
Okay. I want to ask a little bit, but how did you manage volume during COVID? Because you had huge volume, if I remember correctly.
So our Phoenix ER and medical hospital site in Chandler, which is funny, it's Phoenix ER in Chandler, we normally see somewhere around anywhere 15 to 20 patients a day, and at one day we saw 186 patients.
This is in the heart of COVID, right?
Yeah, this was I can't remember what it was. 2019, I think it was. If I remember right, it was August. I might be off on that. It might have been May. 2020. And it was. I saw 88 patients. Now that day, I don't think that we gave the most excellent of care to people, but part of the excellence of care was we got people in, treated and tested within 15 to 20 minutes, even with that volume. And that took an incredible lift. We had to call people from home. We had our radiology staff delivering COVID results to people in their cars. It was an incredible lift as a facility. And the team that we had there was incredible. I mean, I keep going back to our team. I give all the credit to my boss, Dan Stites. He is, I think I'm part of that team, and I think I'm a leader on that team. I don't think I am the one who would have had the vision to build this team. We have registration director that's amazing. We have a pharmacist who's also the COO. We have a CNO who does all sorts of things, chief nursing officer, and and then we don't have a CEO. We have two facilities now. It's just I'm flabbergasted that that people didn't think about this before.
What are your other doctor friends experiencing if they're not in the model that you're in?
So I just hired 28 physicians in the last month and a half. And almost universally, they are completely burned out, still seeing incredibly high patient volumes without any support staff. And they feel like they're hung out to dry, that at any minute they're going to make the wrong move and hurt somebody and that their career's over.
Is that the way you felt before you came over? And also, did that escalate
Absolutely.
for them during COVID?
And then the other thing about that too is that when they come to us, they know that we're ER physicians. So they know that we have been in the trenches and are in the trenches working right next to them. And that's a completely different field than an administrator who has no idea and wants to take as much risk from the hospital and place it on the physician. And that's a goal. We have all these national groups now that have taken all of the contracts in the valley, and we're one of the only remaining non-national group ones that has individually managed ERs. So
national groups that have lots of physicians that they hire and then they just contract.
So I'm responsible for all the hiring of physicians and APPs, which is nurse practitioners and physician assistants. And so, they are directly responsible to me. There's not an administrator. There's not somebody in a different town. There's not somebody that they've never seen coming and sending them an email and saying they're doing something wrong or they need to increase their billing or their charting is lean and they need to fatten it up. And it's just it's incredible.
I hope there's no administrators in the room of anything. By the way, that term is getting a real hard knock today. And also, don't forget to text your questions. I want to make sure you get a chance to ask Peter some of these questions too. I think we're getting some in. Okay, but you're now a publicly traded company. I mean, you're going to have those pressures to make a little bit of money too. I don't.
We're doing great. Like I'm assured multiple ways that we won't have any kind of impact directly from us, from the kind of the corporate structure for at least 6 months, maybe a year. So we'll see what happens. I mean, maybe they're blowing smoke, but so far the guys that I work with have been incredible. I mean, Tom Vo is running the whole thing, and I get texts from him sometimes, and he's a great guy. So he's an ER physician, and he's running all those places. So it's really different. It's really different than your normal hospital. And I would encourage people to even just come by. I'll give you a tour.
Well, yeah, where is it though?
So there's East Valley Emergency Room and Hospital, and that's in Gilbert. It's on Power Road, pretty close to Power and Ray on the South 202 loop there. And then Dobson and Queen Creek is where Phoenix ER is. And that's they're both open 24 hours and beautiful
Plans to
facilities.
develop more, right? Plans to develop.
Plans to do a lot
Build some more.
Starting one in Maricopa and then going to move on from there.
All right, tell me one story where you didn't do something to somebody that they didn't need done, or you had to make that decision. You got to tell us one of your stories. I know it's hard to pick from.
Do you want?
You was also a physician in Honduras.
5
You could
years
tell
in
us
Honduras.
5 years in Honduras with his family down there. You could tell us a story from there.
One of my favorite stories in Honduras was we didn't really
Try
have.
not to make it too graphic.
No, it won't be graphic.
You've told me graphic stories, so I'm just reminding you.
I have graphic stories.
Make
This is
it
not
not
one of
that
them.
graphic. This is a genteel crowd here at the Phoenix Business Forum.
So there was a high amount of mental health problems in Honduras that are just completely unaddressed. People with florid schizophrenia, paranoia, and I mean really bad mental problems, walking around villages, attacking people, walking around with machetes, on drugs, and so I talked with several people, and we got these long-acting medications that it's an injection that lasts a month, and they're antipsychotics. And so it's revolutionized some of the care for people like that. But I couldn't get them to come to the hospital because they're literally just roaming around in the jungle. And so I would get on my motorcycle and I would put a little pack of injectable long-acting antipsychotics, and I'd be driving down, going spearfishing or doing something, and I'd see one and I'd like chase him down on the motorcycle and tackle him and inject him. And then he'd be good for a month. It was great. And I had like a little schedule of these 9 guys that I would, every time I encountered him, I was like, oh, nope, he's good. He's got another 2 weeks, and it's like, that was a really strange thing that I did. But it was great when they would take the medications, when they were given the medications, they would have a month where they'd be near normal. It was amazing. They'd go back to farming, helping their families. It was really crazy. So, pun intended. I don't know.
That's a good one. That's a Little House on the Prairie. Black bag doctor going to the house. Not exactly. You're on your motorcycle with long-lasting antipsychotics. That's fantastic.
I thought about buying a tranquilizer gun.
Just shoot them as you go by with the tranquilizer gun.
Well, there's a couple of the guys were really big, and they would carry a machete, and I was like, I don't know if I want to tackle that guy. Like it's.
All right, that's a good story. He'll probably get another one from these questions. Let me go over to the questions, and those are going to be up on the screen here. Oh, there was one up on the screen.
Do you think COVID will shut down stuff?
You think COVID could shut down or slow down businesses going forward? Yeah, the future.
So I personally declared COVID over March 1st, and I think that all of the reiterations of the virus that I've seen from Omicron have been very benign. That does not negate the fact that there could be a more lethal strain out there. So I'm cautious to say anything about that. However, what I'm seeing now is that it has been relegated to more of a common cold, which coronavirus was before COVID-19. It was one of the common colds. So I think that to the impact that the common cold will have on business, I would say that's more likely and should be planned for going ahead. Now, politically, it's always been a football, but it looks like the tide has kind of turned. Everyone is maybe seen with all the dropping of the mask mandates and things like that. I'd like to see probably the vaccine mandate go away, and before I'd be sure that, and I have data that I would think would be good with that. So I would say less likely, but it's a small possibility.
Do you think that the medical profession has...
And that's my opinion. I don't have any great data behind that, so that's not, I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but.
Well, I'm wondering too, if you think the medical profession, public health has learned anything. If another issue like this was to pop up, should we expect there to be, I don't know, I know you can't predict a different response, but have they learned anything from it?
I think it did point out to some pretty gaping holes that we have as far as our preparedness for something like this, like for a true pandemic. I think the death toll in America alone is atrocious. So the
Preparation like supplies, preparation like our own health?
I don't know if there's maybe a couple things that I want to point out about COVID in general that are really amazing. The medical community within 3 or 4 months made a vaccine against a virus. And I don't know if you guys understand the technological advancement that actually portrays. Vaccines, historically, we have about 9 years of testing and about 3 years of development. And that's when we have a safe vaccine. This vaccine was probably not as safe as it could have been, but also saved millions and millions of lives. I think at this point, if I look back, that was an incredible lift that the medical community did. And I think there's a lot of things to learn about how we did it. I don't think allowing a company to have 3 months of R&D that was paid for by the government and then have also indemnity because the government is the one who bought and administered the medication is a good thing for the public. It was a great thing for Pfizer. $33 billion a quarter worth of profit is pretty amazing. But I think there's something that we can learn from that. But I do want to give a huge, shout out to the medical community, to the research industry, because they did save, tens of millions of lives with that vaccine. So it's a very interesting dynamic. And then secondarily, the monoclonal antibodies were an incredible life-saving thing as well. For people who weren't vaccinated and needed something, it was amazing how well that worked. So I'm impressed with some of the things, and I'm depressed about some of the other things. But
okay, great. There seems to be a huge shortage of workers in our country. Do you think COVID deaths has caused this? I am pretty sure you cannot attribute the COVID deaths to they didn't just kill workers. I think it was there was some predilection for ethnicity that came out of the data, but I don't think that that's something that you could transfer specifically that the worker population was affected more. I think that's more of a cultural and generational effect on our workforce. We'll tackle that another time. So it wasn't COVID, but the predilection data that you mentioned, that's interesting. So there's a predilection for ethnicity. You found some correlation. We all heard about age. We all heard about pre-existing conditions. All that stuff you found to be accurate.
So the age was really crazy. The number of deaths in the United States below age 18 directly attributed from COVID, there was something like 3,000. It was incredibly low, and then they recently have actually taken half of those away. So some of those numbers are just astounding. It makes you look at your risk-benefit ratio with things. But then the same thing. So it was one of those interesting points, because as the data has come out, it's become more and more clear that we did not look at natural immunity as any kind of ability to defeat the virus, and it clearly is. we also looked at the vaccine as the only treatment when there was clearly other modalities like monoclonal antibodies. There was other medications that people looked at, and at some points, looking at that data was really difficult, and I couldn't substantiate use of any other medications than really ibuprofen, prednisone, zithromycin, fluids, and monoclonal antibodies and the vaccine. Everything else just didn't seem like it was working at all. So it was really interesting that there was so much misinformation. And there was another thing that was crazy to me was there was some definitely people who made policy changes based on something called preprint articles, which to me is a moral breakdown of our research ability. So these articles are submitted to the New England Journal of Medicine or to the Lancet or to some other Journal of Emergency Medicine. So they submit these articles, and instead of them going through the normal peer review process where they verify the data, they verify the collection method, they talk to the people involved, and they make sure that there's no hidden data or subsets that weren't taken in, that they also go through the calculations and make sure that all of the calculations that they did were, in fact, the calculations that should have been done. And then they look at the conclusions and base whether or not that they can actually make those conclusions from the data sets that they provided. And that's a really rigorous process, and it takes almost 8 months usually to do that because they have multiple people review it and people who are steeped in statistics, steeped in the medical knowledge, and look at the different fallacies or biases that are inherent in the literature. And to look at a preprint article, none of that has been done, but it is still printed with the authority of the New England Journal of Medicine or the Lancet or any of the kind of the major journals. And so what you don't hear is once you make policy off of the preprint article, you don't hear that, oh, well, it didn't make it into the journal because the data was not valid, or they hid a subset of data, or the person who was doing it was being paid by someone to alter the data. I mean, and so you just don't hear that because it just doesn't make it into the journal. So it's really interesting that it's more of a leap first and then look where you're leaping afterwards. And that was probably the single most disturbing thing that has arisen out of the pandemic for me is the dissolution of the moral fiber of our ability to practice evidence-based medicine.
I remember having a conversation with you at one point. I don't remember when it was during COVID, but I remember you saying it just doesn't feel like people trust doctors anymore. And I think I said, yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
No offense. I like you, but...
Well, when you look at the mountain of information that's out there, and you look at the biases within that information, and you look at the errors within that information, and then you look at the fact that not only do you have all of those things, but you now have an ad machine that's controlling your searches for that. Like, how are you going to expect a physician to have the best data? How are you going to expect someone who is highly trained and able to winnow through that data to not have to spend multiple hours figuring out one detail of something? And it became really political too, which was...
Well, that's what maybe getting back to the question about what people have learned or not learned from it. Like, do you think there's some new procedures in place to prevent that in the future? No, there's not yet. The industry's not talking about it. The medical profession's not talking about it. Okay, next question.
Well, I mean, I am saddened by the fact that people are making decisions without doing adequate research. But that's always been the problem, is you see so many patients, you don't have time, you're exhausted. People don't have time to do the research. I thank God I was able to do the research. Like, part of my job was to do that research. But I don't think the average emergency physician should be expected to winnow through the amount of material that I did. I mean, it was prohibitive. And if you're a physician, you're a pretty smart guy. You've had to do some testing to get where you're at. You've had to learn some things, and I don't think it's a lack of ability. I think it's I think it's where the culture of medicine has placed physicians, all physicians, that you now work for these large companies. You have to meet this certain amount of productivity. If you don't do that, then you lose your job, or they cut your pay, or they do. I mean, there's all sorts of motivators, but I cannot. This is a horrible thing for me to say, but I cannot disagree with the public's mistrust of physicians due to the fact that they are not always doing the thing that is the best for the patient. It may be the best for the company that's running them, or the medication company, or and as medicine becomes more of a business, which is what we're trying to get away from, as it becomes more of a business, the true cost is to the patient-doctor relationship, because you can't trust someone who is trying to see you in 3.5 minutes. There's people who are outstanding physicians. I count myself as one of them. If you give me 3.5 minutes with someone, I will start making mistakes. And that's why I work where I work. I don't want to be in that boat. I want to take amazing care of people. And I don't know, sorry, that's
That's well said.
my soapbox.
Are you saying that all big hospitals are bad and that the doctors there are sellouts? I think you just kind of touched on what you think of the doctors as individuals and versus the system that is controlling them.
I have a high amount of respect of anyone who has gone through the process that I have to be a doctor. You cannot go through that process without having some sense of long-term goals, and those goals have to include wanting to take care of people. And otherwise, you won't do it. I think big hospitals may be where I would place some more of the kind of the blame for squeezing the physician. Of course, I'm very physician-centric as far as my views. I want the physicians to be allowed to treat the patients to the best of their abilities. But I want to set them up for success. I don't want to squeeze every drop of productivity I can out of them. I think it's a horrible way to do things. And so that last question, I have a high respect for other physicians, and I hope that they have a high respect for me. My entire job right now is to make sure the physicians around me are absolutely set up for success. So,
this how I think we have time for this one. How has insurance benefited or hindered good medicine? Anything that you haven't?
How many days do you have?
Yeah.
So I mean,
has
just
it benefited?
my example of the
benefited?
MRI. That's most of that is an insurance driven. The pre-authorization for MRIs and those kind of things are all, that's all driven so that insurance companies have you see the physician more. They get part of that billing. They get part of the referral. They get part. I mean, it's the insurance company is honestly, if you look at it from a business standpoint, the best business is insurance. You have a fear-based sell, right? Like you could lose your limbs, you could be in the hospital, you could die, you could leave everyone without any kind of with huge bills. You could destroy your family. Your daughter's going to be a drug addict. The amount of fear that you can place on somebody for injury or death is pretty incredible. And then on top of that, to say if you think about this. This is a crazy point. We have mandatory auto insurance, right? We have mandatory health insurance. I mean, you get a penalty if you don't buy health insurance, right? I mean, that's still my understanding. I've tried to stay away from that stuff. The next thing is you also have to have mortgage insurance now, right? So all the insurances they're legislated. You have to have them. And if you don't have them, the only thing that I can think of is life insurance. And that's going to be the next thing, right? So this is where I would go. I would start into life insurance, and I would say, hey, you guys, if you die and you leave a debt, you can't have that. So now you have to have life insurance. So now people will have to pay life insurance. That's where I would go next. So then you'd legislate every type of insurance.
And now we'd like to introduce Peter's campaign for Congress in the fall. No, I'm just kidding with that statement.
If I was the insurance companies, that's where I would go.
Yeah.
I'm not the insurance company.
Okay, I want to end with this. Well, you get like 90 seconds to tell us what we should do as individuals. I mean, we have you here as a physician. How should we interact with the medical system?
So there are some things that I can tell you that greatly aid the physician who's under a time crunch that's going to have to see you. One of them is to have a complete medical history and medication list with you at all times. And the best way to do that is to put it on your phone and have that available for them to look at. That's an incredible. I can look at someone's medication list and I can see, oh, you've got congestive heart failure. Oh, you've got low thyroid. Oh, you've got. I mean, I can parse out most of your diagnoses just from your medication list. Secondarily, giving the physician facts and not giving them what you think is going on. I've had so many people tell me, oh, I had a tuna sandwich 3 days ago. I think that's when my leg hurts. It's like, oh, I'm pretty sure they're not connected. So I think I love hearing those things too, because sometimes they're very helpful. Like, I had a lady who said, well, I have had multiple problems with birth control before, and I just started it again. I think this might be related. And it was absolutely related. So those are very salient points. So I don't want to discourage that, I guess I should say. But the other thing is really funny. This is my favorite recent story. Sorry. I had a lady come in with right lower quadrant pain, didn't want to eat. She had a slight fever, slight white count, classic exam for appendicitis. And I went into the room and I said, I'm really concerned that you may have appendicitis. And she said, oh, I don't have appendicitis. So I'm dealing with, like a physician bias, right? So she doesn't believe me. She doesn't think that I have the authority to do that, which is fine. Because if you don't think that I do, then I don't. That's the reality of it. So I told her, okay, well, I would like to do a CT scan to confirm the appendicitis. And she said, that's fine, but I'm 100% sure it's my ovary. Well, get the exam back, and it says appendicitis. And I go back to her, and I said, I'm really sorry you have appendicitis. And she told me, oh, I'm sorry, I decline appendicitis. So I didn't know what to do. I'd never had anyone decline a diagnosis before, but that's happened several times in the last month. And this was like 6 months ago or 8 months ago, so I don't know how bad it is, but find a physician that you like and that you trust and that cares about you. If they don't, just move on. Because it's, I don't want anyone to be subject to someone who they feel like they can just decline the diagnosis because the person doesn't know anything about them. And it's really crazy. So luckily for me, her husband came in and he was a paramedic and he was like, honey, you have appendicitis. You can't decline appendicitis. And I was like, listen to that guy. That guy knows you. So he was able to convince her, yeah, you need surgery. You have to go. So I was really thankful for him, really thankful for him. So,
all right, I'm going to jump in there. That's great. Okay, I want to welcome David Stockton back up to wrap us up. Let's give Peter a big round of applause for being with us.
Well, we try and end all of the Phoenix Business Forums with a blessing, and that's just a prayer over the business community here, over the people in the room. And again, nothing required from you. We just believe that there's a God who really loves people, that he loves this world, and he loves to bless his children. I've never done this before. I don't even know how this is going to go, but I'm actually going to ask our interviewee to say a prayer over us as a physician, as a man who prays. And this is my brother, just in case you didn't know as well. But and one of the questions was, why is he so much better looking than me? But that didn't make the cut for some reason. So would you pray for everyone? Come on up here and pray a blessing over this group. Yeah, they don't decline.
Thank you so much, God, for your presence with us and your desire for us to know you and to be with you. And I thank you, God, that you have paid for our sins. And Lord, just as we go about our days, I ask that there would be a kind remembrance in the things that we do, that we are made by you, for you, Lord. And I ask that the things that we do today are to bring you glory and to bring others kindness, and that we would walk humbly with you, Lord. In your name, Jesus, amen.